Volume 2 gave us a thrilling, emotional, epic conclusion to Stranger Things 4. Though before I discuss any story elements, specific moments, visuals, I wanted first to talk about this show's strongest component, its characters, namely the ones I failed to mention in my review of Volume 1. Lucas has a great full arc this season, as he is tempted by a life of popularity, separated from his friends, until he realizes and accepts where his heart truly lies, as he feeds the douchey Jason a knuckle sandwich. Speaking of Jason, he is a solid, well-developed character. You may dislike him, he may be pompous from the get-go. He certainly becomes an enemy to our heroes, but the motives of this basketball star blinded by satanic panic are really clearly and effectively displayed, and Jason's presence enhances this season's narrative. In fact, his presence is imperative to this season's narrative in a number of ways. Not to mention Mason Dye does a great job of portraying Jason. Gaten Matarazzo has such brilliant acting instincts. He's naturally very funny, but in Volume 2, he really gets a chance to display his immense dramatic talent. Erica continues to be bold, brave, and hilarious, with an amazing reintroduction back in Volume 1. Dmitri adds a great dynamic to our group in Russia, and the very humorous though corrupt Yuri's redemption story was a lovely touch. This cast of characters is a special one, absolutely overflowing with talent. This episode for me is the Millie Bobby Brown and Matthew Modine show. Millie Bobby Brown gives this very powerful performance, while Modine kills it in his final turn as the cold and ruthless Dr. Brenner, whose vocal performance has always intrigued me, as Brenner's tone is almost meek, slightly frail, which greatly contrasts with his cult leader-like practices. Now, before I touch on potentially my only gripe with Stranger Things 4, which relates to Martin Brenner, I'm going to return my attention to the amazing Elle, whose primary emotional arc this season is beautifully and satisfyingly wrapped up in this episode. In her past, whilst in captivity, she is verbally and telepathically abused and made to feel isolated by her peers. This plotline is mirrored by Elle's present in California, as she's made to feel utterly alone by Angela and company. Her boyfriend, Mike, has also become hesitant to say I love you as she returns to the caged animal-like captivity of Dr. Brenner. But Elle confronts her traumatic past, which not only helps her to regain her powers, it also helps her to understand and embrace the fact that she is not the monster, Brenner is. And Millie Bobby Brown's delivery to Modine in regards to this realization is simply Emmy-worthy. Which leads us to my favorite moment of the episode, and undoubtedly one of the show's most spectacular scenes. I am, of course, referring to Elle's badass telepathic takedown of the helicopter. It is very visceral, and the fact that Elle fucks around with the helicopter, spins it about and such, prior to forcing it to the ground is an excellent touch. It leads to this visually captivating explosion. Now on to probably my sole gripe of this season, Brenner's underexplained return. At the end of Season 1, we see Brenner attacked by a Demogorgon. The second this occurs, the camera cuts, and if we're following the typical rules of TV and film, given that we don't actually see Brenner die here, there's a definite possibility that he survived the Demogorgon. It is then briefly hinted at in Season 2 that Brenner's still alive, so I was always anticipating that he would at some point return. However, what I was missing in the execution of said return was a tangible, physical display of precisely how that Demogorgon attack went down and concluded. We've seen how vicious and ruthless these creatures are, especially in recent episodes, so I would have at least liked to have had Brenner be severely, more realistically, physically damaged as a result of the attack. Instead, Brenner bears a comically small facial scar, and nothing more is really said on the matter. This is a minuscule complaint in an otherwise superb season, the show's best, in fact. I really dug Brenner's presence this season. Modine shined in the role even more so than ever, and I love the closure that Elle received due to his presence and ultimate death. At least some of the strong and persistent Elle's wounds are now able to heal. Episode 9, The Piggyback, is packed with excellent moments. Eddie's Metallica concert atop his upside-down trailer is indescribably badass. Hopper taking on and ultimately beheading the Demogorgon with a sword was incredible, and a very cool touch considering, primarily speaking of seasons 1 and 4, the show's general narrative framework is centered on a game of Dungeons and Dragons. Eddie's death scene was emotional and exceptionally performed by Joseph Quinn and Gaten Matarazzo, the latter also doing a beautiful job in the scene in which Dustin delivers Eddie's uncle the news of his nephew's passing. I love the very heartfelt scene between Will and Jonathan. The Byers brothers' relationship was really the heart of the show's first season, so it was great to see this dynamic focused on again. And I appreciated the authentic acknowledgement between the characters that it has been a while since the two have checked in on one another. Murray wielding the flamethrower and Nancy firing off her shotgun at Vecna were a pair of thrilling badass moments. Jason melting into two pieces is eye-wideningly cool. It was also cleverly and subtly foreshadowed earlier in the season. Lucas is getting sick in the bathroom the morning after drinking, and Jason, who's outside the door, says to him that the first hangover's the worst and it makes you feel like you're gonna split in two. I also dig the Empire Strikes Back-esque, dour, foreboding ending. This apocalyptic and nightmarish visual excellently sets up a final season that is sure to be larger in scope than any other. And personally, when it comes to follow-ups, sequel stories, bigger typically isn't better. It's dumber, but Stranger Things is an exception to this opinion of mine. The more we've explored this show's mythology, the more the world of this show has been widened, expanded, the more my enjoyment of it has increased. But scope and vastness, of course, isn't everything, not even close. I'm a huge fan of the entirety of this show, including the smaller, more grounded earlier seasons. But my adoration for the seasons prior to 4 shall be addressed on another day in a separate video. Until then.